Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. This is pretty much the midpoint of summer 2025, meteorologically speaking anyway, and I wanted to have a quick reflection back to what was said and what has taken place. Obviously, heat has been an ongoing story, particularly so across the south of the UK and into the near continent, but obviously in recent days we have seen some substantial warmth lifting up into the northern half of the UK, encompassing all of the UK and Ireland through the course of the weekend just gone. Then that transferred further north as we've seen that area of low pressure drifting in off the Atlantic. That's been forcing all that hot air to lift up into Scandinavia, where we've seen temperatures in the low 30s in parts of Norway and Sweden. Even Iceland recording a 29.5 Celsius. That is very close to the all-time Icelandic record up there. And it's another warm day up across the far north of Europe here. We're introducing fresher air across particularly England and Wales and Ireland. We've actually got some sunshine and some reasonable warm temperatures, still above average for the middle of July and summer up here across the far north of the UK. But we've got a system bringing unseasonably cool, wet and windy conditions across the bulk of England and Wales. I say unseasonably cool, I suppose you're close to the average across England and Wales, but some gusty winds, 40, 50 mile per hour winds, has been influencing many areas of England and Wales through the course of today. Spells of heavy persistent rain, and where you've got that mix of sun and cloud, we're seeing a little bit more convective element to some of these showers, bringing some hail, gusty winds and thunder and lightning. But our very own Richard Trott sent me this graphic here. This is the 500 millibar geopotential heights. This is summer so far up until the 9th of July, so it's about a week out. But the 1st of June through the 9th of July shows this upper level setup. We've had an unusually deep area of low pressure up towards Iceland, a very strong ridge of high pressure dominating the majority of Europe away from the north. And if we can kind of just zoom in ever so slightly to make this a little bit easier to see, no, in fact, it's actually doing the opposite. It's not going to blow up as much as I would have liked, but you can generally see the situation that we've got going here at the moment. This was the idea that I had away back at the end of May. Cooler and wetter the further north you go, warmer, drier across the bulk of mainland Europe here. Very, very briefly, I want to quickly talk a little bit about what I had forecasted. So I believe that there would be a tug of war. We've obviously got the full, back half of July and all of August to go. But it's interesting, some of the model output. We are seeing a little bit of an eastward progression of the Manjulan oscillation here. Up until now, we've had very much a rise in motion within the Indian Ocean and over the maritime continent. Very strong subsidence over the Atlantic basin. I think that's been helping drive this drier and warmer than average pattern across the bulk of Europe here, including the UK, by the way, away from the far north and west. But I believe that there would be a tug of war between deep Icelandic trough and an Iberia to Italy ridge. So very, very decent call, in my opinion, anyway. Bear in mind, this is all the way back. This is actually the July outlook. I do apologise. I thought this was a summer forecast. But generally speaking, let's go on anyway. The tug of war between deep Icelandic trough and Iberia to Italy ridge has provided persistent heat across the west and central Mediterranean up into France, with pulses of heat expanding and contracting over the Benelux and the southeast of the UK. Atlantic fronts associated with lows north and west have frequently swept eastwards, punching the heat dome and at times temporarily deflating it. We're seeing that at the moment here. It from the south, UK, North France, Benelux and Germany, but unusually strong ridge has always bounced back between fronts. Now that is exactly what we've seen in the last week or so here. Frontal systems moving across the UK and Ireland as the pushed eastwards, heights rise, but to the back of that, and we've been seeing the heat this time around, rather than the previous heat spells, we've seen it reaching all the way up into the northern UK and up into Scandinavia, up into Iceland as well, where it's been fairly cool and unsettled for the majority of the summer, particularly so up across Norway, Sweden, and Finland, up into Iceland as well. So Atlantic fronts containing fresher oceanic air, frequently collided with high heat and humidity, dominating southern areas of Europe, leading to frequent storms which have packed quite a punch, damaging wind, large hail, frequent lightning, and flash flooding. 2-3 rounds of strong storms have impacted the UK. So bearing in mind, this is a analysis from the end of June for the month of July. Iberia, France, perhaps Italy, has seen the most consistent region and heat. However, the Low Countries has seen unusually high temperatures consistently through the month, and that has lasted through the first half of July as well, may I add, with 2 to 3 heat surges crossing the channel into the UK. While the southeast has been pretty persistent, continental heat further north and west over the UK has been hit and miss at best, courtesy of closer proximity to the low up over Iceland and associated frontal systems. One notable push of warmth came around the 2019 through the 21st of June, with 43 recorded in Spain. So this is obviously back to the month of June. 43 in Spain, 41 Portugal, 37 in France, 33 at London's Kew Gardens, while Ireland recorded its warmest day since 2018, 29.6 at Roscommon, warmest day for the UK so far. Then we've obviously seen heat surges into the early portions of July. We've seen 35.8, we've seen 32.2 in the north of the UK here. And generally speaking, this has been what was said for the month of July here. So the July verdict was average to slightly below average temperatures and precipitation for Northern Ireland and Scotland, warmer, drier than normal, with further hot spells. Ireland, England and Wales cooler across Scandinavia, well above normal, and drier for southern and central areas of Europe here. So that was the verdict. We have up until just a week or so ago remained fairly cool and unsettled across the northern half of the UK. Let's skip back then and see what was said with regards to June and July in terms of the overall summer forecast here. So this is a kind of look back at the first half of summer, meteorologically speaking, to see how the forecast is playing out versus reality here. So let's have a quick look at what was said with regards to the summer forecast very briefly, and then we'll get into today's discussion here with regards to the rest of July here and then the month of August, because there is some interesting things showing up, by the way, regarding lower pressure. So we'll wait and see. The MJO is pushing across the Pacific. We are seeing a little bit more of an active jet stream across the Atlantic, and therefore more back and forth, I think, is probably safe to say. So, in my opinion, when looking at the past dry springs, obviously we've had a very, very dry spring. We've also had a warm spring. There was no definitive evidence to support either hot, dry, or cool or wet. But it's a bit of a guess. So, in other words, we've seen dry springs before and we've had wet summers following. However, combining the record warm SSTAs, particularly just west of Europe here, so this was written back at the end of May, remember, dry ground, warmer than average water temperatures, a neutral ENSO, and likely slightly busier than normal Atlantic hurricane season. That remains open to question as well. It points to a highly volatile, varied and potentially extreme summer of weather swings. 2015 and 2020 comes to mind. The unusually warm surrounding waters compared to normal and the dry ground could support some notable heat surges, Spanish plumes, but also a recipe for serious flood events. Now, I am somewhat concerned that with the potential of the MJO moving more eastwards, activating a more Atlantic, a more active Atlantic in terms of tropics, with lower pressure potentially becoming a little bit better established as we head towards the back half of July and into particularly August, with warmer than average water temperatures, you're increasing the precipitable water values, the moisture within the atmosphere, which could then get released in the form of rainfall here. So I think that it's going to be very interesting as we head towards the end of this summer. Does that residual heat that's been built up over the last 4 to 6 weeks, does that get released in terms of significant rainfall? That's going to be the question that I'm asking. So yes, the potential of notable heat surges, we've seen that, and possibility of more Spanish plumes. Obviously, the previous hot spell that's just ended, it wasn't a Spanish plume, it was more homegrown high pressure that built in place thanks to the ripple effect over the Pacific Atlantic and into Europe. But the recipe for serious flood events, especially in the form of thunderstorm activity, a couple of hot, dry spells is expected with equally low pressure dominance. They'll lean towards a low northwest, high southeast on the whole, with fluctuation of both. And that is what's happened. This has been a pretty good summer forecast so far, it has to be said. The evidence is there. What's taken place versus what was said. And you can let me know in the comments section below what you think, whether you agree with what I'm saying or not. But there's past evidence suggesting a drought summer for large swathes of continental Europe, possibly extending into England. We have still got very dry conditions the further south you go over the UK and Ireland. Not too bad up in the northwest, but that dryness has helped generate warmer temperatures compared to average. Now, the dryness has also, I think, played a role in providing some relatively cool nights, even with hot days. But the temperatures have fallen away quite substantially during the overnight period, it has to be said. Low dew points, lower humidity, despite the warmer than average waters surrounding the UK and Ireland, by the way. We've seen the temperatures swing quite unusually dramatically for the middle of summer. For example, 30 Celsius at Aboyne, overnight period, would drop to 5.5. I'm pretty sure Altnahara, close to that 30 Celsius mark by daytime, down to 6 or 7 Celsius during the overnight period. So the temperatures are cooling off. That could be due to the overall dryness of the atmosphere, and that could be a legacy of that dry spring. It's speculation. I don't know for sure, but this is quite an interesting one here. With cooler eastern tropical Atlantic, my hunch is the Azores high could be stronger than normal through the first half of summer. You could argue that that's been the case. We've had an extension of the Azores high up into the near continent with a lean into the southern half of the UK, lower pressure up towards Iceland, with frequent northward extension in June. At the peak of this summer's heat, I think 38 to 40, locally 42 is possible in France. We've seen that, including the north. Maybe not quite 42, but certainly we've been up there in terms of the upper 30s around the Paris area and northern portions of France, even up into the Low Countries here. 34 to 36 in the southeast of England, 28 to 30 widely England and Wales and Low Countries, and possibly 30 to 31 in the Scottish borders. So this is the forecast that I had at the end of May for the first half of the summer. What was said about June? Potentially the driest of the 3 months, with a lengthy hot spell of high pressure, above average temperatures, below average rainfall for much of Western and Central Europe, including the UK and Ireland. Now, you could argue that lower pressure dominated the far north and west, with the exceptions of 1 or 2 warm days and sunshine. The month could commence unsettled, but a change to more settled heading towards the 10th of June, with a peak of the warm, dry, hot spell between 10th and 20th, or before a return to lower pressure late month. Near average rainfall for Scotland, Northern Ireland and the Republic, average to below average for England and Wales. Maximum temperatures 31 to 33 for England, 28 to 30 for Wales, and 28 to 30 for Scotland. Not quite there in the month of June, 27, 28 Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. We did see those temperatures on the island of Ireland. July, what was said about that? Another somewhat mixed month with back and forth pressure swings containing decent summer heat with a lot of warmer than average fuel in the surrounding seas. Thunderstorms could be lively with frequent light and gusty winds, and hailstorms with flash flooding an issue, especially to end end a week or a week to 10 days hot spell. Not quite seeing that extreme in terms of any flash flooding. We've been fortunate enough up until now. We've obviously got the second half of summer. August is traditionally a wetter time. Or during the summertime, you tend to find that June's the driest month, August is the wettest month. Cooler and wetter and windier for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but not without some warm to hot days, and that played out quite well as well. So what has been said about the month of August? Depending upon the MJO position, strength, and tropical activity in the Atlantic, we could see everything in August. With major heat surges, that's what I think we will see as well, by the way, as hot surges into the month of August, and or a lengthy hot, dry spell due to recurving tropical cyclones reinforcing the high over Europe, but also some lows generating unseasonably cool, wet and windy days. Timing of high versus low impossible to say, but highly variable month is possible, and I think that we could see average to below average rainfall for England and Wales, southern portions of the Republic of Ireland, average to above for Scotland, Northern Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland, the north of the Republic. Maximum temperatures that we could see in the month of August, 34 to 36. I do think that is very much possible into the month of August. We've got a lot of heat stored up to the south that I don't think would take a huge amount for it to lift northwards again into the southeast of the UK. And near continent. 29 Scotland, 28 Northern Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland. Warmer, drier spells compared to last year. Chance of hot and dry periods in each of the 3 summer months. And I think you could pretty much agree that June and July has seen spells of hot and dry, particularly so leaning towards the south, but not exclusively. We've seen it in the far north as well. Long, hot and dry summer, likely from much of Central Europe into the Mediterranean, wetter the Balkans and southeast, which has actually played out quite well. Coolest, wettest, Iceland, northwest UK and Ireland, drier the further south and east you go. So the verdict was warmer than normal for much of Europe, except the northwest. Wetter than normal, Iceland, Scotland, Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, southern Norway, Sweden, and the southeast of Europe. Drier than normal, much of Central and Western Europe, including much of England and Wales, and the southeast Republic of Ireland as well. Let me know in the comments section below what you think with regards to the summer forecast, even the July outlook as well, versus what we've seen so far. So yeah, interesting stuff. Last 10 days in terms of rainfall anomaly were drier than average across the bulk of the UK and Ireland here. In terms of, let me see here, just bear with a second. This is the upcoming 7 days of the ECMWF extended. So we're going from a drier than average signal to a wetter than average signal, which is quite interesting to see. In terms of the active jet, I think we are starting to see some changes taking place. Now, the MJO is expected to move further east over the Pacific. That is going to have an impact. Nothing to write home about in terms of East Pacific activity, but the Atlantic, we are very slightly up, rising a threat here. There's a feature here just off the east coast of Florida that is going to be drifting westwards into the Gulf. Plenty of warm waters here. We've got relatively low shear, a decent environment. So we'll need to keep an eye on some sort of development in the northeast Gulf over the next 7 days. There's only a 40% chance of development, by the way, but nevertheless interesting all the while. We've got an invest area over the East Indian Ocean. We've also got 3 features over the far west Pacific. What does that have in terms of influence on the jet? Well, we are going to start to see a little bit more of an active jet over the Pacific. We've seen some very strong winds blowing across the Pacific, hence why we've had tremendous warmth drifting away from Japan towards the North American continent with colder waters underneath here. We've had a very strong, compared to normal, Pacific high as well as the Bermuda high, with extensions extend into the northeast of Europe here. As we go forward, I think we are going to start to see lower pressure trying to exert a little bit more influence on the Western European pattern. And some of the reasons for that is the MJO. This is off the CFSV2 weeklies, by the way. You can see here the eastward progress of this pulse of upward motion in the Pacific. We've got still subsidence over the Atlantic Basin, but if we play through this here, the CFSV2 is struggling to get that greens into the Atlantic. If you do so, you would increase the chance of tropical activity. But with lower pressure, doesn't necessarily mean you can't get hot weather. It doesn't mean that you're just going to get wet and cool conditions all the time. Areas of low pressure that progress eastwards with a more active jet could suggest that we're pulling some heat ahead of these lows up into the UK, Ireland, near continent, and there is definitely a possibility of seeing hot spells over the next wee while or so here. Even towards the end of this month, there is some model indication that we could lift some real heat out of Iberia up into the UK and Ireland, but it's becoming a little bit more complicated once you start to see progress, the progression, natural progression of summer. The atmosphere is changing, the water temperatures are warming up. That has a different influence on the atmosphere, so to speak. But these are the sea surface temperature anomalies compared to the average. Look at that warm waters through both the Atlantic and Pacific mid-latitudes. We've got cooler waters into the tropics, and that's having a different distortion in the overall global wind circulation as well. So, I think I've waffled on enough, to be honest with you, but I just want to show you one more thing. This is a relative humidity, and obviously back over the weekend we had very low humidity within the atmosphere, hence why we had quite big diurnal swings between hot days and cool nights. Play through this loop, you can see here that the Bermuda High extends up into the Azores, up into the northeast Atlantic. This is during the course of today. There's that area of low pressure. We've got a mixture of cool, dry versus moisture within the atmosphere. These areas of low pressure don't have any deep, rich moisture associated with it. Look at the amount of dry air that is extending between the Azores and Iberia. Once that area of low pressure pulls eastwards, we're going to lift some of that drier air. That area of low pressure regroups to the west of the UK and Ireland. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're going to pull in some warmer air up from the south. We're going to increase the temperatures into the high 20s in the southeast, mid 20s possibly over eastern Scotland. But there is greens showing moister air associated with this area of low pressure. But so not only the temperatures are rising, but also the humidity will rise as well. But you notice here that as we move towards the latter half of this week, this is where things could start to set a tone for the second half of July. We've got that area of high pressure that regroups, repositions between the central North Atlantic all the way across into Iberia here. That would suggest higher pressure building over the southwest of Europe, but lower pressure potentially becoming more of a thing with systems riding around the top of that high into the UK. But obviously it's a still back and forth pressure swing here as these lows move in. Yes, a more active Atlantic jet, but as these lows move in, you then lift the heights ahead of the system, then the drop as the system moves through. You've got the cooler, fresher air on the backside of that low. Then it's a repeat performance here. We'll get more areas of low pressure riding a relatively active jet around the top of that semi-permanent Bermuda High. I think we are going to get a little bit more mobility, less block as we move into the second half of July, but there is heat spells possible as we move through the second half of this month. I want to just show you the GFS ensemble here, and we will end with this here because this has been a pretty lengthy video, and dinner is near enough ready as well. If we play back here to around about the 12th of July here, there's that trough to the west and south of the UK and Ireland, strong ridge of high pressure lifting north. As that trough then progresses eastwards, it's lifting the heat and the ridge northwards up into Scandinavia and Iceland. But if we play through this loop here, you can see here again the heights rise between the Azores, Iberia, up into the UK during the Wednesday, particularly Thursday, Friday time frame. Then their area of low pressure moves in. It then provides a fairly unsettled weekend to come. Then as we play it through, you can see here that that feature clears through. Heights then build back northwards, replacing that void from the departing low. We could see some more heat coming back in, particularly the southern half of the UK. Notice here it's not building right up into the UK and Ireland. We've got a flatter flow and geopotential heights across the North Atlantic by this stage. So we're starting to see a flatter regime with higher pressure to the south, lower pressure to the north. But there is going to be this back and forth, so to speak, here. Let's end with this here, the temperature anomalies of the GFS. Let's look at the European view. And upper heights 500 millibars, upcoming 5 days. You can see here, there's the area of low pressure in between the high to the north and to the south. We're seeing the heat build again over Iberia. There's that area of low pressure as we move into day 4 through 8, building into the UK. Then we've got this setup here, lower pressure over the north of the UK, a flirt with higher pressure to the south. But it looks as if the low is beginning to become a little bit more influential as we move into the second half of July here. And that could be due to that eastward progress of the MJO. So we'll wait and see what happens. In terms of precipitation anomaly, upcoming 7 days here, you can see here it's wetter across that central swathe of the UK. A little bit drier the further north you go, but you notice here Ireland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, Southern Scotland, wettest compared to average, closer to average southeast, drier than average across the north. You can see here as we'll play it through, still holding on to that wet signal into the period 18th through the 25th of July here, and then we have something a little bit drier looking. In terms of temperature anomaly here, go back to the upcoming 5-day period. Warmer than average remains to be the flavour of weather, but as low pressure tries to become a little bit more influential, it looks as if we are going to turn slightly cooler than average as we move towards the end of July. So, yeah, possibility that we are going to start to see some more appreciable changes as we move towards the second half of July here. But keep it right here in the channel. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time with more. Bye for now.